Thank you, everybody, for coming out. My name is Patrick Field, facilitator of the CCC. A few things to note for members of the public in particular. There's a sign-up sheet in the back, so please do sign up. And if you want to leave your email, you can go onto our general email list, like people notifying people of meetings and the like. The local cable television station does televise us, so just to let you know that you're being televised. And if when we get to public comment, if you do have public comment, make sure you use the mic. It's not for this room, which has great acoustics, probably the best acoustics of any room I've ever worked in. But the cable doesn't work without it, so just to note that. Okay, so it might be good just to do a round of introductions of CCC members' name and affiliation for folks in the public. I see some new faces. So if we could do that, and I'll also hand around the signage. So we can start with Sage.
Hi, I'm Sage. I'm a carpenter working for the super rich people around here. Now I live in Lenox. I started out in Connecticut in Danbury and kept moving north through my years, and now I live here in Lennoxdale, nearby. So I've been basically following the river. Yeah, it's been a long time, this process, and I just wish we could see a lot more progress and a lot more good things for the people and the river.
Great, thanks, Sage. Melissa?
Melissa Prevention with the Berkshire Regional Planning Commission.
I'm Jim McGrath. I'm the City of Pittsfield's Park and Open Space Program Manager.
Dennis Regan with the Housatonic Valley Association for one more month.
But not that you're leaving. We're not clapping that you're leaving.
Yeah, I'm not sure that clap was for, but anyway.
Yeah, he's gone.
When's the next meeting?
Not in April.
I'm Gene Shaggy, representing Travel Unlimited, Berkshire County League of Sportsmen.
Tim Gray, Director of the Housatonic River Initiative.
Judy Herkimer, the Housatonic Environmental Action League, Cornwall Bridge, Connecticut.
Audrey Cole, Housatonic Environmental Action League in Connecticut. I'm from Sharon.
Lynn Fowler, I'm on the Housatonic River Commission representing Canaan, Connecticut.
Barbara Cianfarini, Citizens for PCV Removal.
Jane Wynn, Berkshire Environmental Action Team, or BEAT.
Becky Cushing, Mass Audubon Berkshire Wildlife Sanctuaries.
I'm Tom Potter from Mass DEP in the Boston office, the lead administrative trustee for the Natural Resource Damages issues.
Susan Peterson, Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection.
Velma Barzatini, Citizens for PCB Removal.
Dean Taliaferro, EPA.
Patrick Field, CBI.
Elizabeth Cooper, CBI. I'm new to this group. Hello, everybody.
And thank you all, everybody. She is the new Rebecca, so to speak. And thank you all for members of the audience attending. Really appreciate you being here. Okay, so agenda and a quick agenda check. So our plan today is an update from Tim on the TAG grant recipient, anything that Tim wants to share. Tim Conway is not here tonight, so Dean is going to give us an update on the mediation and the status of the non-contested submittals from GE. And then we have, I think, some relatively brief updates on some of the remediation projects ongoing that I think Dean will cover and the like. And then we do have another retirement in the works. Jim Murphy, where is Jim? I just saw him. Is going to be retiring, and so we wanted to provide a bit of time for that. And I also see some stuff in the back that may or may not be related to such. And then we'll do some general updates and the like. So a quick question is it best to leave Jim's kind of piece at the end where it's scheduled? Should we do it at a different time? Is that the right place to kind of do it?
It's up to you.
Probably at the end.
Whichever.
I'm good with anything. I mean, if people want to dig in now, go right ahead.
Do you
Maybe
want?
we'll just get started, and if people want to take a break and get some food or seltzer,
Well, there has to be a little roasting and toasting.
well, that will come.
Yeah,
That will come
that's right.
apparently in the agenda. That'll, if we leave it there, that'll let us get through the agenda quickly.
And do we have any issues in the library eating?
We passed that.
Okay, we're
Glad
good.
if we do it quickly.
All right, eat delicately and not on the floor, so that means I don't get to eat.
There's no alcohol.
There's no alcohol. That is correct, Jim, especially for you.
That's at the other EPA events.
That's after, when everyone goes across the street or down the street. Okay. Tim, over to you. Any updates from HR?
Well, I don't really have much to say. It's been very quiet on the river. There's not much happening. We've been involved a little bit on the site in Great Barrington again, the log home site, which looks like it's going to go through and be built, which is a really to us, a very sad thing because it's being built on a dioxin site, and we've put a lot of time into it over the last 2 or 3 years trying to get it stopped, and it's probably going to go through. So that's one not so good part of the river. The other not so good part of the river is the 3 things that HRI likes to say at this point at every meeting. And I'm going to say it again, is that 1, we need to take more PCBs out of the river because what's slated to take out right now is going to leave huge amounts of PCBs in the river. And HRI and me, I've been saying it for a couple of years now, is the river will stay contaminated with that much PCB in it. That's what our feeling is. We also think that sort of looking the other way from the sensitive areas now, which the state of Massachusetts has led the drive on trying to stop cleanup in the sensitive areas, which to us is just crazy because the sensitive areas are where the salamanders, the frogs, and some of the benthic organisms and other things live in those ponds. And to say we're not going to clean them up because we're afraid we're going to hurt, actually the report, if you read the report, it says we're going to hurt a tree, a type of tree in this one bog, and therefore we shouldn't clean it up. You know, it's a supposedly, I guess, a protected tree. And so I looked up this protected tree. You can buy it at every state, every, you know, what do you call it, wildlife nursery. What's that called, Dennis? You're up on that stuff.
That's close.
Yeah, close enough. You know, a wild nursery where they do wild plants and stuff like that. And you can buy the thing right there. You know, so I just said to the, you know, what makes sense to me is buy about 200 or 300 of them. You know, you're all set. And but clean the sensitive areas. And then the very last thing is don't dump it in the dumps on the side of the river. The dumbest idea that anybody could come up. I've already had one like 6-year-old say to me, "That's so stupid." The 6-year-olds seem to know, and they're very full of a lot of wisdom. So anyway, those are the 3 things. Not much else going. Jim, it's been a long ride. It's been a long ride. HRI has gone through many years of EPA people retiring. You know, it's kind of interesting. So we see another one go, and we do wish you the best in all ways. And come out and visit us. You know, we'll be here in 20 years. There'll be a CCC meeting, and
when the dredge is ready to dredge the rest of river, we're going to invite Jim back to be there for the ribbon cutting, so to speak.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. All right, update on mediation.
Okay, one thing I forgot to mention, John Ziegler, Mass DEP, called me this afternoon. He was intending on coming, as he usually does, but something came up, an emergency late in the day, so he apologizes he could not make it. Yeah, so the update on, I guess, mediation or rest of the river. First, as you know, the EAB, the Environmental Appeals Board, issued their ruling. We are continuing to work on that and address the concerns and observations made by the board, but we don't have a specific date for when EPA is going to issue that response to the board. With regard to mediation, you know, it's currently ongoing. There's been some little hiccups there, but I think Tim was the last one, but now all the parties to the mediation have signed the final version of the confidentiality agreement, the mediation agreement. So that's where we're at there. And
is there time for questions now, or?
Yeah. All right, so hopefully that will either pick up speed or
so the state,
reach its
well, that was
conclusion.
my question, is that with all these months and we're at the stage where there's a decision made that it's confidential, even though that was known before going into it?
I think there's always been the intent to have a mediation agreement so that parties could speak confidentially. There's been, I think, several versions of the mediation agreement, and from what I'm told, this is the last version, and I believe all parties have signed. I did see, that's my understanding. Jane,
What was sent out to all parties is not all signed, and it needs to be clarified. If you can take that back to the mediator.
And Jane, are you saying that not everyone has signed the last version that's been sent out, or that you have concerns about that?
What I was sent as, okay, everybody signed, isn't, and I'm extremely frustrated.
Add to this frustration, I think that was a fear of a lot of people going into this process of remediation, is that we've already done it in the past and it really quite hasn't worked, and we're going into it again with a lot of expectations that it's not going to work. And if it's only gotten as far as
not even
signing an agreement that it's on the makeup of the process, how long was this process going to take? Is there a drop dead date? If it's not working after 4 years, are they going to table it and say, okay, we tried it again for another time?
Yeah, I don't really have an answer for that. There is no set timeline. I think if there's not significant, if there's not progress made, then, there's a decision that's got to be made as to how long to proceed with the meeting.
And who will make that decision?
That'll be, EPA senior management probably within the region, or, we do have bosses above us in Washington.
And Dean, just to be clear, so if and when the confidentiality agreement is signed by all the parties participating at the table, that then would allow the mediation to begin, quote unquote.
There has been mediation with, I'll call them interim mediation agreements, so there have been meetings that have been going on. It did get slowed down for several reasons in December and January, but there have been discussions that have been going on and off, but now hopefully that, assuming they're all signed and functional, that there can be more mediated sessions.
Tim?
I'm part of the mediation, and it's been going like a tortoise. And I don't, I'm not supposed to say anything about this. And when I got into this, they told me we were going to be able to talk to the public, and everything was going to be a fair exchange of back and forth and this and that. And then I get on there and find out that they're saying now that you're not supposed to say things. And I don't think it's right, because the process itself, and I'm going to stick to that, because there have really been no meetings that mean anything so far. Okay? We had one big meeting with the whole group, and then there's been one attempt to meet with single people in single groups, second attempt to do that, which went. I didn't participate in it because it's just, it's like, I feel like, I kind of feel like we're in a setup a little bit, and I'm worried about it. And the environmental people, and I think I would agree with pretty much, I hope everybody agrees with this stance here, is that that's on the environmental side, that, we need to be able to make a stand, not only about 3 points on the river to get a better cleanup, but I feel like I have to say something about the process so far, that it's just not going well. And I'm going to stop there. I'm not sure anybody's really happy, and we tried to warn you about Mr. Bickerman before we got into this. And I think at this point, maybe we need a poll of the mediation people and ask how much confidence everybody has. And those people come from all different sides of the fence, right? That are in the mediation. They're not, they're not friends of HRI and things like that, So the point is somebody should be watching the mediation other than Mr. Bickerman.
Any other comments or questions on this at this point? Dean, I assume you will take that back to Tim.
I will, and Tim apologizes he couldn't make it. He will be back next Tuesday in the office if you have suggestions. I mean, he's always available. If you send him an email, he'll call you back. Call him direct. He did put that on.
Okay, I was going to bring up when he'd be available. It's not really, it's the question, I just mention it, but I'm sure people are aware, what the city of Pittsfield wants to do with the money that was allocated in regard to the PCBs. I didn't know if there was any information out available, or we have to contact Mr. Conroy.
As far as if you're talking about from the 2000 consent decree,
Yes.
where GE provided funds to the city of Pittsfield, I don't think EPA has a role in that. That's the city's money to do, use at their discretion.
Okay, I just wondered what the exact terminology was, or what was actually agreed upon. Okay, I have some of it, but I just wondered it. Okay, so he can be contacted when?
He is out of town until Tuesday.
Okay, thank you.
I have his cell phone if you want it.
There you go.
There you go.
What was I going to talk about? Oh, the new EPA administrator. Is it Mr. Administrator Perez, or what's his name? Who's
The national one is.
No, not
The regional
no, Region 1.
We have an acting regional administrator right now. It's Deb Zaro. She's a career person, meaning she's not a political appointee. So she.
Well, I got a press release that a gentleman.
There was a,
Kelsey or Jim, you want to handle that?
So there was a press release that was sent out a month or so ago in anticipation of us having a new regional administrator, and he decided not to take that position, so we
Smart guy. Got a brain.
Sorry?
Smart guy.
So that was the gentleman from Maine, right?
Right.
All right. Then I saw another. Why? What? I forgot why he didn't take it.
I don't know.
Okay. And then Administrator Dapolita Dunn moved up into the assistant EPA administrator position, correct? Under Administrator Wheeler.
Correct.
And I saw another name proposed or accepted for Region 1 that was not Deb.
It was probably the name from me.
No, it wasn't. It was a Latino last name.
Yeah, I'm unaware of that. It's certainly
information that we don't have.
It may have been related to someone working with Alex Dunn in DC or something, but we don't have anybody new.
Can we meet Deb, pronounce her last name again?
Zaro.
Zaro?
She's a long-standing career person, right?
Zaro.
Z-A-R-R-O.
S-Z-A-R-O.
Yeah, well, that would be nice to have her come out and introduce herself, and because she's a steady, solid presence at EPA Region 1, and I'm sure, I assume you work with her day in and day out, and have for years. What do you think about that, Dean?
We'll relay that request.
What do you think that's?
I mean, we'll relay to you guys if the group has an interest.
How long has she been with EPA?
25 years?
Yeah,
20-some odd years.
20 plus years.
So, good, I think request relayed for the acting regional administrator to attend or come out to Housatonic, this meeting or otherwise, to reach out.
When she's not the acting, which she has held many times during the multiple transitions of regional.
She's the deputy regional administrator, so since we don't currently have a permanent regional administrator, she's the acting regional administrator.
But she's assumed that post many times over the years.
Correct.
And when she's not the acting deputy regional administrator, what is she in EPA?
She's the deputy.
Always.
That's her role. She's the deputy regional administrator, and she is stepping up now as the acting regional administrator.
Acting regional, okay.
Audrey?
I just wanted to finish up on this mediation. We attended the open meeting with Vickerman, I forgot when it was held, last fall at some point. And I just find it ironic that a mediator he spoke openly in disparaging terms of people at the table that night. And from what I understand, I don't understand this issue of confidentiality when he himself doesn't exercise it, because he apparently speaks disparagingly behind people's back during the mediation process. So I just find, I don't know how any trust can be implemented moving forward on this, because this is coming back to people and it's upsetting people. And I basically said, I don't believe that you can say anything, that you can take anything at face value of what he says when he represents what someone else is saying. And I find that troubling. And I feel a lot of people have recognized that.
In my experience with mediation, the first step in mediation is that everyone agrees on the mediator. We have never agreed on Attorney Bickerman, and we haven't from before he came on site. We haven't from the previous time that he attempted to insert himself into this site when he wanted people to meet him in his hotel room in Lenox. We shared all of that with you and with Attorney Conway, and I had issues with him from Indian country, from indigenous people who were involved in various mediation scenarios with him, who had they don't speak poorly of people, but they really didn't think that he was a fair person on any level. At the meeting that Audrey was at, after I spoke that to his face, what I knew, he accused me of going online to find some Google tidbits to hold against him, which was very far from the truth. I spoke by telephone with elders in Indian country. And he approached me at that meeting, kind of not so privately, came up to me during a break at that meeting, got so close to my face that he started spitting and screaming at me through his screams, how I created rumors about him and that all he has is his name and his reputation, and I told him to stop. He's not the man for this job. And in the early days, we all provided EPA with some alternate potential mediators, and you guys are just not probably able to be in a listening mode right now. And nothing was done, and all we're getting is glazed eyes. So I have no hopes for this mediation, and I actually hope that it breaks down.
Audrey, maybe last point.
Yeah, I just want to follow up. I do think that must be the intent behind all this, because the mediation process, because of the person who's running it, has turned it into a clown show. I mean, it really is embarrassing. And I think people just don't know how to proceed because they feel so uncomfortable. And I think that must be the intent why he was selected. I mean, the selection process was not taken seriously. And so people are stalled. In one way, for us, that's probably a positive, because it's a question of us surviving right now to get through the nightmare of this current administration. So in that sense, but I do find that he makes EPA look even more ridiculous, the fact that they accepted this person. And I really don't see how any really rational consensus can be built in this process with such a person who, I mean, I don't know if that was taped that night, but I was really shocked at him openly disparaging the municipality in front of everybody, a very important group who probably is the most powerful group. And he said some really awful things that they had to stand up. They were right there and had to object to. That he misrepresented their positions to the group in front of everybody. And this was in an open process. And I have said to people that you cannot take Mr. Bickerman at his word, because he doesn't represent what the other parties are saying honestly. If he can't do it in the open, how can he possibly do it confidentially?
I hate to be...
Your final comment is just so...
Yeah, I hate to pursue this even further, but the public meeting at the high school that we all went to, Barbara, you all can tell me the date on that, but Mr. Bickerman behaved so poorly, and anybody who did not see that or wasn't there can get it. It was filmed, and they can see what a poor job he did and how he insulted a whole group of people, hundreds of people in that auditorium, with his not letting us applaud somebody for making a good point until he realized that he had to back off of that. And you all know that, anybody who was there. And he's terrible.
So, Dean, I think points noted.
I will relay those to Tim and Brian, definitely.
All right.
And to Bickerman,
Yes.
please.
Jane?
Trying to get the highlights.
We have cable vision, so we got all right here. Open and transparent. Remediation projects. I think there's several things that are, what I just want to stop and say, just recognize, I share on behalf of you all, this has taken forever, and it is painful, and the cleanup that you all deserve, whatever it might ultimately be, is not happening, and it makes this site incredibly frustrating for people. Whether mediation or by fiat or whatever is ultimately the way to get to clean up, it's incredibly frustrating. And on behalf of all of you, the time, the decades, the energy, the worry, the anxiety deserves cleanup, and we're not there yet.
I just want to say that what you're hearing tonight is a lot of the frustration. And a lot of us have felt this for a while about this thing, and somebody's got to, watch this sky in a way. And they tried to clamp down on me, and I didn't let them do it. And I don't really want to get into the story and tell you what it's about, but it's another Bickerman major mistake. And he was outrageous.
It's ugly, get rid of him. He never...
A lot of frustration, so I think that can be conveyed back to the region, and if parties, in fact, parties of the mediation are frustrated both about process and intensity. Okay.
I will relay it.
Let's party.
Okay. No, I want my
Okay.
question answered first.
We're getting to party soon.
Barbara's got a question.
Despite the pain and suffering and frustration, we will still have cake at these of the day.
On the job.
Pittsfield remediation project. So Dean, do you want to kind of go through pieces and we'll take them?
Yeah, one of them is on Silver Lake, and then a couple other items were brought up, I think by CCC members.
Did you skip the status of non-contested?
Oh, thank you, Jane.
Yes, thank you. That's Connecticut.
Yeah, the status of the uncontested conditions. So these are conditions that were in the permit that went before the EAB that no parties appealed or contested. So even though portions of the permit are stayed, these are in effect. So I realize that's not perfectly clear or simple. So a lot of those are still going on. What we just approved, and GE is ready to do year 2 of the vernal pool monitoring and some assessment of the hydrology in pools and what the floodplain is. So they will be starting that as soon as the weather turns. We're looking at the second week in April. And the objective of that, obviously if something is certifiable or certified vernal pool, that's of significance, and the recommendation for, and the thought process is just because something didn't qualify in 1 year, it's much better to do it in 2 consecutive seasons. So GE will be doing that with EPA oversight this spring and summer and fall as needed.
And when you say GE, who actually does the work?
I believe it's AECon, and it's I believe that's the contract. AECO.
All one word or hyphenated?
All one word, I believe.
Capital AEC.
Oh, they're probably all capital.
And Dean, was that a firm who's done that work before?
They did the work last year, yes. And the reports that they did last year are all up on the website.
Thanks, Jim.
A couple other items. GE submitted probably a year and a half ago 2 inspection, monitoring, and maintenance reports for the Woods Pond and Rising Pond Dam. We gave them extensive comments with a lot of support from people in this room. They provided revised plans in December. We've gone back and forth with them on the revised plan. It was much better. There's still a few more items they need to address. So that is ongoing. And there's several other sampling plans and monitoring plans that we are having some back and forth with GE and hope to get it approved. So that's all I have on that.
I don't know if this is the appropriate time, but what's available to EPA and to the public if GE goes under? So are we able to escrow from them? Is there insurance in place? Has any thought or discussion gone into this to make certain that the goals for this site are met financially by the PRP?
Yes, and unfortunately Tim's not here. There is a financial assurance mechanism that if we can have Tim update.
We should put that on the as a good agenda item. So you to add to next meeting. I think we'll look at it in this item.
So there is a financial instrument that GE provided. I think it's best that Tim provide the response in a better context than I can do.
We haven't had a CCC meeting in a long time, and it would be good when Tim can't make it to have, what's the other attorney's name?
The only other attorney that's been on the GE site for Pittsfield has been John Kilborn.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I can't remember if he came out.
Yes, to have John Kilborn come,
Okay.
someone. Or to put Tim on the conference phone or something?
Yeah, I don't think he's available for that right now. I think he's traveling.
Oh,
I think in general, I think the request is helpful to have an EPA attorney here to answer kind of some of these legal questions, whoever it might be. And I think we'll note the financial assurance question, probably a good agenda item for next time. And we will talk about it.
so you all have spoken about that?
Yes.
Okay. Any other status updates from the non-contested stuff? Anything else? Okay. All right. Silver Lake.
Silver Lake, we talked about this. Can people hear me if I'm sitting? It's just
It's kind of low at times.
Excuse me?
Can they hear you?
It's kind of low at times.
Okay.
We'd like you to stand.
I can stand.
Nicely.
So Silver Lake, we've talked about this several times. It's actually been 5 years since the remediation was complete. Remediation occurred in over 2 years, 2012 and 2013. 3 main components. There was excavation of sediment near a former GE outfall. That was 400 cubic yards. At the interface, at the bottom of the the lake, the interface with the bank and the sediment, there was some soil removal to allow for the cap to be installed without filling in too much of the lake. And then the bank soils had some extensive remediation of both bank soil, and there was a lot of concrete debris, former structures, concrete fill. So that was about another 10,000 cubic yards of material. The bank was restored with clean fill and native vegetation that's more appropriate for the lake surroundings, and the sediment, as you all know, was capped with a sand topsoil mix. This is just a picture of what it looks like. It was taken last year. This is the part of PETA property that has the solar panels, and then PETA's property is over here. This is former GE property. GE's outfall, the main one, sorry about the laser flow control, was right here, and that's what actually created this delta. That's not a natural delta, that's sediment that built up over probably 60 or 70 years of discharge. So the soil that was excavated, the sediment, excuse me, that was excavated was at the edge of this outfall in this area. And then at the lower part of these banks is where there was remediation and a lot of soil remediation just along the slopes. You can see the walking path here and some benches, so it's a pretty good overview. You can see the vegetation's coming in really well.
Right next to your red pointer, there's that sort of white patch. Do you know what's causing that?
Yeah, some areas where it's really shallow, I'm not 100% sure. I think it's some vegetation, just due to the nature of where it's flat. I'm not 100% sure what it is.
So it's not an algal bloom.
Looks like a stormwater outfall to me.
That one I don't think is. I would say that more so for these two. There are two city storm drains over here. And this is the PETA one. This one, there might be, but for some reason I don't think that's what that is, that particular one.
Barbara, you have
Why was the entire artificial delta tested and why was only that edge of it remediated?
That was a provision of the consent decree. This was and is contaminated, definitely, no doubt about that. As to why it was selected 400 cubic yards, I don't know. I know that there was a very high detection level there. I think it was 20,000s in that area, and that's why that got taken out.
You know the levels in the stuff that remain. You know what
We have a slide on that later, like on average, but I certainly don't know each sample. I do remember one was about 20,000.
So the concentration was high, but not high enough to cap it? Is that correct?
For the part that was removed?
That delta, the fake delta.
Oh, it was definitely high enough to cap. The decision was made not to excavate and remove it.
It was negotiated as capped. The delta was not negotiated.
The delta is
The delta is capped, I'm sorry, if I said
The delta is capped.
It is capped, it was not excavated. The only excavation was actually the part of the delta that was underwater, the sediment right at the edge of the outfall pipe. When this was flowing, you can sort of see it, not very well, but the channel, like the pipe was here, it was a 48-inch pipe, and obviously while GE was operating, they're still running the stormwater system, so there was always a channel running through out to here. And I believe the worst part was right at this interface, and that's the area that was excavated.
So there was how many cubic yards?
400 cubic yards.
400 cubic yards excavated. The rest of it was capped.
The rest of it was capped.
And the connection left in place underneath the cap.
Except, like I said, along the shoreline, that was taken out just so that it didn't push out another, say, foot and a half.
And generally, the remediation for that was negotiated in the consent decree itself.
The performance standards were set in the consent decree.
Tim?
I think you just answered my question, so I think I'm good.
All right.
Judy?
Go back, please. The outfall that we always had concerns about coming off of the PETA property, Jane, was that a NIPD's outfall?
It's supposed to be, but the permit still isn't issued. Thank you, EPA.
Jane, I have a question. Is the permit, is there an old permit still in place, or has it ever had a permit?
There's an old permit the GE had from, what, 1998
Right, so
or something?
GE had an existing permit, or there was a permit issued to GE in the early 1990s. My understanding is the way that it works, if a new landowner takes part of that property, the permit components that are applicable to the outfalls on the new property owner could transfer to the new property owner. But it is an expired permit.
They are supposed to be updated every, I'm not sure.
Well, they expire, it is expired.
It's been a long fight. PETA doesn't want the new permit, and so far they've gotten their way, no matter what the rest of us say.
I think it was due for update in 1996. Isn't that the date?
The GE permit was, the GE portion of that permit for the land that GE retained, which is significant, was reissued. I'm not sure of the year, probably maybe 2010, maybe sooner.
But that had been expired for a while before it was reissued.
It was, correct.
So who's sampling that outfall? Because that's known to have had hits.
PETA is monitoring it. I don't recall what the requirements are, to be honest. The monitoring requirements.
And they are getting hits in PCBs, or at least last time I looked.
They have
were getting
always, when it's, as long as it's wet, there's hits.
Jane, was that data posted somewhere by the city or?
It's,
I don't remember.
it was posted on the the remediation website. I believe the MPDS program has their own, there's a mechanism to find those discharge monitoring reports.
So PETA does not want to assume that outfall, even though it's coming from the PETA property?
PETA would rather fight with EPA than GE for trying to remediate it. They're happy to fight about the permit.
PETA has the permit, it's assigned to them, it's expired.
It's not been
It has not been renewed, so I don't know if that answers your question. It's not that they don't want it, they do own it, they are the permittee. It's an expired permit that requires monitoring.
And EPA worked long and hard at coming up with a new permit. PETA saw it and didn't like it, and it has never been issued.
There was a draft permit for public comment issued.
Do you know what year that was, Keith?
It was a long time ago.
5 years ago?
We had a meeting.
Hey, it could be 5 years ago.
So late teens somewhere.
5 to 8 years ago. Yeah.
And you're not concerned
That was a
about
Obviously, my
your
preference
cap?
would always be that there'd be zero discharges, whether that's feasible or not. There's another question.
Do you have data, the next slide, do we have any data on what you're collecting that shows whatever?
We have data that we'll get to is official sediment data, is what I'm trying to talk about.
Well, let's look at that, but if people may want to think about the outfall vis-a-vis the data you show, and then we can have further conversations.
So the requirements, this particular presentation is more on the 5-year, the required in the consent decree and the long-term monitoring plan to do cap monitoring 5 years after cap completion. They also did monitoring, there's other monitoring that I'll talk about, but this was the 5-year monitoring. There's 21 locations where GE had to do monitoring. So the yellow stars and red stars. The reason for the difference is the yellow ones, 11 of them are cap thickness only, and the 10 in red have chemistry or PCB sampling within those sediment, with the cap cores, which I'll show you a picture of.
Can you show where the outfall is on the map?
Well, here is the one with the island. You can kind of see, this is the delta, so I'll do that one first, and you can see the channel. PETA's outfall, I believe, is right here.
So if you were to pick up something, it might be that.
19 has PCB samples collected. There's various ones. 14's in the middle, the low spot of the lake.
Tell me, do you have a question?
Dean, because of the activities that they're now going to allow on Silver Lake, do you have to check it more often to see that it's not been destroyed or had a problem?
The requirements, it's been checked, the thickness has been checked every year for the first 5 years, and the sampling was done, and the next sampling of the sediment cap will be 5 years from now. So I don't know what you mean by an increase in activity. There's a little bit of activity, but nothing that should adversely affect it.
I keep reading that they're going to allow things, so wouldn't that have some effect upon the cap that they might,
I'm
do
not aware of
something to
anything
it?
that's proposed that would have a significant effect on the cap.
Tell me, do you have specific concerns about an activity in particular?
Yeah, I've seen a few people fishing, that's about all I've
When
seen.
would the next time be then that they would check that? You
In
said
5 years,
When's the next year?
2023.
And also about the shorelines, because the cap is not attached to the shoreline like some places, is there a chance that that could be loosening up if it's not checked?
The shoreline has armor stone or riprap or rock on it, and that goes a little bit below the water level, so that's how it ties into the bank. There might be additional inspections on that shoreline every year, but not of the sand cap once you get away from the shore. That will be in 2023.
Dennis?
Becky? Dick?
Dean, what was the justification again for monitoring PCBs and cap thickness on some and just cap thickness on others?
I think the consent decree specified 10 locations, and we pushed to get additional ones for the thickness.
I was just wondering, this looks really familiar to something you've shown us before? No? Have you shown us this before?
Same slide, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
It's the same sampling that they did 1 year. They did this sampling either immediately after construction, 1 year after construction. For every year, for the first 5 years, 2, 3, and 4, there was just thickness of the caps. So yes, this is a repeat. You've seen all this.
Okay.
So the only difference here is the last time PCB analysis has been taken out of those sediment cores was 4 years, was in
Got it. Okay, thank you.
maybe 2014. So the 5-year event was 2018.
Got it. Thank you.
And you've had a couple of cap integrity problems?
Not that I'm aware of. There was 1 year where it was a little low in thickness, so additional cap material was placed.
So that's a cap integrity issue.
Okay.
And are you doing any more air monitoring at Silver Lake at all?
No.
Not even periodic?
This is a schematic of the cap. It describes it's one layer, but what the purpose of the layers are and why the thickness is 14 inches. G was required to place 14 inches of this sand material. The presumption was the bottom 2 inches could mix when it's placed with the sediment. It would intermix with the underlying sediment, so that would not really be considered a part of the protective cap, because you could picture the contaminated sediment would be sort of on top or intermixed with that 2-inch layer. So what was required was the real theory behind it is this 6-inch chemical isolation layer is what is designed if PCBs are going to migrate from the surface, from the water, through the native sediment. The migration up through the cap is the concern. That's the goal of the cap, not to prevent stuff from being deposited on top. That's a separate issue. A cap can't prevent that. The cap can prevent what comes up from the bottom through groundwater migrating up. So this is the layer, this 6-inch layer is designed to retain any PCBs that may migrate up, if you can picture water pushing up through the cap. The water would carry the PCBs. At very low levels, the PCBs should desorb or sorb onto this isolation layer. The top 6 inches is really to prevent bioturbation or disturbance from fish from mixing this layer completely, such as if you had contamination somehow get up in this layer, it could all be intermixed and come to the surface. So this also really is a protective layer. It'll also serve as a isolation layer, but in fact, the design was just based on these 6 inches. And then on top, as with any lake, there's natural ongoing deposition.
Dennis.
I'm sorry, Dean, but also the 6 and 2 inches, they're all just sand though?
They're all the same.
They're all the same
physical components.
Same size sand?
Same size sand, same material. They all theoretically will absorb the PCBs, but we didn't want to, there wasn't a lot of mixing here because it's a pretty placid lake in the way it was deposited, but you could get situations where it mixes, and if it mixes with the sediment, obviously, then it's not performing that function. So when we made G measure the thickness, we were shooting for 14 inches, and we could talk about how to actually measure that and why really 12 inches is what, you need 12 clean inches without mixing to meet the design standard.
I just just wanted to ask my husband, in my experience, bioturbation can happen much deeper than 6 inches. When we were digging the agricultural well on part of the 800 acres, do you remember how deep that green frog was that we saw?
Down about 6 feet. It's certainly possible there could be some disturbance in there. It is sand, so it'll collapse on itself.
So 6 feet, we found a green frog in an area that, on our property, that we were digging for an agricultural well that was in a wet, moist area. 6 feet. Green frog.
Obviously concerned about the thickness of the thing, so.
Yeah. This is an example of how you collect the cores, or what the core would look like. When we go out on a barge or a boat now, this is probably a picture of the barge when they're doing the remediation. It's a 3-inch Lexan tube that gets pushed through the sand and into the native sediment. There's a pretty clear distinction. This black layer is the native sediment, and this is the cap. So it's fairly simple in most cases to discern which is which, and then to measure the layers. You take those cores, those Lexan cores, and basically slice them in half or cut them in half. And again, you can see this would be the underlying sediment. This is your interface, or your mixing layer. There's no ruler or scale, but there's a little bit of mixing, and then what GE would do would collect their sample starting above the mixing layer into to within 1 inch of the top of this core, and then the top of the core, the 1 inch would be sampled separately. So you get 2 results. You get an isolation layer. For this purpose, for the sampling purpose, this 12 inches, or whatever the thickness is, sometimes it's more, would be considered the isolation layer, which is a little confusing because they talk about it being a bioturbation layer as well. But it's sampled as the 1 inch deposition, or the top inch, and then down to just above the native sediment. Those are the 2 sample jars that are collected. Okay.
Can you actually see the deposition layer, a line between?
You might be able to see a little. I don't know how clear this is. It looks a little gravelly here.
And when you're actually, have you actually seen it?
I've seen some of them, and they're all a little different. It's probably not a full inch of deposition, but kind of for characterization of the surface, we collect the 1 inch.
Right, and you can see that.
You can see a little bit as deposition, and probably as years go on, you might start seeing a little more. First measure would be, this is a little confusing graph, but on the vertical axis is the cap thickness in inches. So this will include everything above the native sediment. So the top inch plus the isolation layer.
I'm sorry, I'm not getting this one at all. Can you?
Sure. This is a measure, the top, the vertical side is cap thickness in inches. How much cap material was found. On the horizontal side are the 21 locations where it was collected. There's a lot of lines or bars because it was collected every year for cap thickness, not for PCBs, for thickness. You can see on the top, 5 years. I can do my math right. 6 years. And each color is supposed to represent the year. So always on the left is the turquoise we'll go with. And on the right, the latest one is orange. And you can see it's variable. It's not an exact science. You go to different places in the lake, it is going to vary. The key thing is this is the 12-inch line roughly. And they've always been above 12. This blue dot would be the average of the 6 years. Again, all the averages are above 12. It does go up and down. It does vary. It is variable. This was the lowest one this year.
And one of them went under the 12, but not by even an inch.
Not by much, yeah, that one.
Previous year.
It was 2016. What I don't want to do is have GE put a bunch of more sand to get an extra 1/10 of an inch to get to 12, because then they could end up putting another foot of sand, which is just not helping the lake.
And Dean, the fluctuation, because it is pretty fluxy, what's...
I mean, you're out there in a boat, you're trying to get to the exact location with GPS. It's not an exact science. You're pushing the tube in and capping it on the top and trying to hold it with a magnet.
So part of it could be a measurement.
Part of it could be measurement error, part of it, that's why it's just been done various times.
Gene?
What causes that variance like that all the time? Is it drifting? Is the cap drifting?
You might not be in the exact same location. That would be my best guess, because you're out on a boat trying to get it and locating yourself with GPS. And then, especially where the water gets deeper, you're trying to push it to, through sometimes 15 feet of water. You get any sway. I don't know. I don't have a great answer. I just know that they've all been different. This one, different, but on the same hand, some of them seem relatively consistent, and then you'll get some strange outliers that I don't have an explanation for.
Barbara?
But I think everybody is confused about the same thing. What would cause, for instance, looks like it's number 13 in the testing, for it to spike to almost 35 inches? Would that be the hydrology of the water movement over the cap?
I don't think it'd be the hydrology. I don't remember that one in particular. I would have to look back at it.
Can you go back to the map?
To where it was?
Yeah.
13, was it?
Right on a slope.
It's on a slope, so the farther off you get on a slope, your variability will probably be higher. A lot of the slope was placed mechanically, so in some areas they may have really overfilled it. So
And it's at the bottom.
and it's on the bottom of the slope, so you could be more at the bottom, where if you were a couple feet on the slope, it would be a little thinner.
But if things are falling through gravity, then it stands to reason that the spot above it, where it's falling from, is getting thinner and thinner.
If you could absolutely sample in the identical spot, that would probably be true. Why it's different, like I said, it may have been sampled more in a different location that was farther down the slope.
But it still has to come from somewhere.
It could have been placed there. What I'm saying is you could have put the core in two different locations. The first time it may have been at the bottom of the slope, or in a place where there was just more material placed. So it may be evidence of movement or not.
Maybe just because I'm a little over time, maybe we should look at the chemical data.
Chemical, I find a little more interesting, but that's why we did so many different rounds. But no matter when it was sampled or where it was sampled, certainly on average, it's always been above 12. So the key end game is the sediment concentration. Sorry for climbing the way for this side.
Melissa, can you see okay? Okay.
So on the vertical side is total PCB concentration in milligrams per kilogram or parts per million, often used interchangeably. The horizontal would be the 10, this time it's 10 cap locations. They have the different numbers because there's actually 21 locations, but there's only 10 locations that are sampled. What I'm showing is what's called the top layer, the top 1 inch, and then that 12-inch isolation layer or sand layer above the native sediment. These were collected following cap construction and then 1 year after and 5 years after. So there's 3 PCB results for each location. 3 for the top, 3 for the top inch, and then another 3 for the isolation layer. That makes up the data for cap location 1. The top layer, which is the most available or bioavailable, you can see the results again. This is PCBs, this is 1. So only 1 top layer the first year was above 1, it's 1.2. In general, the rest have been below 1, and I've got another slide with averages. And then you can see the isolation layers, most of them were non-detect or very low. the highest one in the last year. Again, for the isolation layer, it's a little confusing because you go from top to isolation. Might be this one, and it's 0.3. So the isolation layers, that 12-inch layer above the native sediment, has very, very low concentrations, and it's pretty consistent.
Judy, question?
Is number 5, which is not here, but it was on the map for sampling, is that closest to the outfall into the river?
Closest, I don't remember, I have to look back.
No, the main
The outfall
outfall
from
into
Silver
the
Lake
river.
to the Housatonic River.
Yes. Is that number 5?
I don't have that memorized. The outfall to the Housatonic River, yeah, is 5 right here. And that is the outfall that goes under East Street to the river.
So what number is, oh, that's number 6, I didn't see that. So is number 6 the closest to the outfall into the river?
6, 4, 10, yeah.
Okay, so can you go back?
So this is 6, very low.
Well, you say very low, but it's still a low loading dose that's constantly coming out of Silver Lake. Of course, it's lower since you've capped it, but it's still a loading dose going into the river, even at low levels. And we know that low levels add up to big amounts, and exposure to low levels is bad, is harmful.
There is a load going into the river.
Yes.
Hopefully it's much, much lower than it was before.
Yes?
I'm much more concerned about the fact that like at 14 and 16, you're getting, well, a bunch of them, you're getting deposition of PCBs.
There's definitely PCBs in that top inch, there's no doubt. This is the average. I think if you look at what we started with pre-capping, the average around 400, so not a pristine lake when we started. Again, the one hit, and that excludes the 20,000, the 400, just didn't put it into the map. The 20,000 was excavated, or that area was excavated. So the average for the top layer, yes, there is some hits. This data, by the way, might be just for the last year, which is why the maximum is 0.99. I just want to point that out. This is the last year's data with average and max, as opposed to all the data. But even with that, the top layer, an average of 0.26 with a maximum of 1 ppm. You can compare that to the 400. I mean, it's 99.9% lower. Is it 0? No. Will anything ever get you to 0? Probably no. If you judge the whole lake, I guarantee you would have higher than 0, because you would never get it all. And you probably have to cap it anyway.
Are you doing any biota sampling in the lake?
The biota sampling in the lake is scheduled for 2023 with the next round.
Could you go back one slide to the, so, thank you. Just a quick question. So is there some action level when and if the top layer gets to a certain level, GE has to do something?
No, the GE's requirement and performance standard is on migration up through the cap. So those are two separate issues. If you saw the isolation layer getting overloaded beyond what the design specified, that would require GE to do something. If it's coming from the top, from a source that they have, is not, if it comes from the top, that's not the cap issue.
So
they're responsible for erosion.
The city of Pittsfield.
Right.
Is there a level which, if it's reached, someone has to do something?
No, there is no bright red line.
Dean, could you go back one slide to see what the non-PETA site, what the concentrations there is? Which site is that? Is the non-PETA site? Well, the PETA's.
The one closest to the PETA alpha?
The NEPTEs, yeah.
Okay.
The non-NEPTEs, I'm sorry.
Okay. No problem.
The in NIPTs.
So again, you can look at this, and I can get this to work.
19, 18.
The 19 is red, so that has PCBs. You can look at that one. This one's at the bottom of the lake, much deeper, 14. Would it flow there? Those would be the two maybe to look at. 19 and 14.
Yeah, 14's the one that's highest.
14 would be the highest, and that's that .99 I think I showed. And then 19 was the one closest to the outfall, I believe. And it's about .3.
Do you know of any other lakes comparable? I mean, this, of course, was a terribly contaminated body of water with multiple contaminants of concern, with staggering amounts of PCBs and all kinds of other things. Do you know of any other lake that in the U.S. that's been capped in this manner?
I think Lake Onondaga in Syracuse area.
Onondaga, Oswego, maybe? No?
Not Oswego.
No?
I think it's
Onondaga?
Honeywell, I believe, is the one who capped it.
What was the contamination in Onondaga?
I think it was PCBs, but I think it was other, I think there were a lot of facilities adjacent to that, but definitely PCBs were in it.
None in New Jersey that you know of?
Not that I am familiar with.
What was the other one that you said? Not Oswego, but another one?
I would have to look up the right name. I think it's Lake Onondaga.
But there's another one in addition to that, because that is the one right in Syracuse. I think it's right behind that giant.
That's the one I'm aware of. It's a pretty big lake, and I believe it was capped.
Yes.
Have you heard from locals at all about the, at least the visual appearance is better and of the lake?
I've heard from certain people that the visual appearance is better. There's a fair amount of people who use that walking path.
There are lots of people who fish there.
There's a lot of people who fish there. I don't know, Jim.
It's become a recreational asset in the city. The usage has increased tremendously from 2010-12 time frame.
Sweet.
I think the business owners are happy, the ones along Silver Lake. I know the car dealers were pleasantly happy. They kind of opened up and you can actually see them. I think from aesthetics, it's been a positive, definitely a positive reaction.
It looks so much better. Is there another solar farm there? It looked like
solar,
a new one?
It's the same Eversource solar power plant that's been there since.
Go back.
So I'll go back a second. So Western Mass Electric owned this area here all the way up to this, I'll call it a former substation. So on property, parcels owned by Western Mass Electric and still owned by Western Mass Electric, there's this bigger solar panel. Then this is their property, and then that abuts to the to the PETA property, to the right of that, if you can picture that.
There it is.
Shoot, this one down here.
Yeah.
This is actually on PETA property, and it's 2 acres, I believe, through a lease or a lease purchase type situation, or long-term lease, whatever you want to call it. So there's 2 distinct sets of panels separated by the former,
It's a
substation. Sorry, spit that out. But yeah, they're the same unit. They're essentially the same unit. They're just divided by the substation.
Next steps?
Yeah, pretty much it. Next steps. The next, like I said, the next cap sampling event is 2023. Cap thickness and PCBs, we're scheduled to expire. We said you gotta do it again in 5 years. The PCBs will be done in the same 10 locations. GE proposed to terminate all the other 11 for thickness, and we require them to do the 3 locations that were of most concern that we're closest to as well. So that's what will happen in 2023, and then separate or same time will be biota sampling.
Final questions on this site?
Okay.
Until 2023, they don't have to do any more?
Not of the sand cap, no.
But not of the sand cap, but they do have to, is there anything annual that they have to do?
I think they have to do shoreline monitoring every year right now. I would have to double check. That's not a separate program, but it's separate from the sand cap.
just want to put in my 2 cents that I'm not happy with the idea that they don't have to monitor things when it has gone below 12 inches. I grant you one location and it was only slightly below 12, but that to me was a clear, bright line in the sand and not having them have to do anything.
I like that line in the sand.
No.
Yeah, sorry.
Shadow underneath it.
And this is just more of a close-up, and I think that might be vegetation.
Think so.
All right, before we move to the two other sort of updates from Dean, anything else on Silver Lake right now? Okay, next.
Okay.
Residential properties.
This, I think, was, well, there's two things combined here. We talked about it a while ago, and I think we gave a presentation. The residential, these are called residential properties downstream of the confluence that abut a portion of the river that hasn't been remediated, addressed the river, but GE remediated 12 of those parcels, or excuse me, not 12, I think it's 8 of those parcels. That was done 2 years ago. One of the properties where there could have been some remediation, it's right, New Lenox Road, the property owner requested not to have that done, and to be protected if she sells it to a new owner, was to keep, this is a very wet portion, in fact there's a vernal pool on it, it's not really a lawn, it could technically, it's flat enough to be converted to a lawn, so we wanted GE to look at remediating it. The owner did not want that to happen. The actual lawn part, where you mow the lawn and it's grass, meets the performance standard, it's all non-detect. So this property was, a use restriction was placed on it to prevent it from ever being converted to a usable lawn. And furthermore, if there is a reason, it will go into rest of the river and be evaluated like other rest of the river floodplains should there need to be any remediation. I think Barbara asked about that, so to do that, there was a use restriction placed on it and a notice is put in the paper.
The question, if it in fact has a vernal pool on it, wouldn't wetlands laws anyway prevent anything?
It would, and that was G's argument, and we said, well, look, we just want you to clean this up so the lady will have a clean bill of health, and they would have had to comply with that, but you know, we thought it might be better to have that remediated.
Pete would say a clean vernal pool is better than one the
I mean,
amphibians are
hopefully
doing.
we will get there now that that vernal pool is in rest of the river, but now it's on a different timeline.
Is that the parcel with the young couple? Maybe they inherited it or she inherited it?
I don't know how the owners came about the property. I don't.
Is that the one?
You did tell us there were small children there, right?
You know, I don't know the family history.
What's the name of the GE parcel across from this?
DeVoe Farm is across the street.
Say it again?
DeVoe
Farm.
Farm is across the street.
Okay, so they chose no remediation
They did.
The other ones.
because they called us multiple times.
We would have been more than happy to make GE remediate it. Yes, they did. So those parcels are all done and are undergoing inspections for erosion.
In the event we ever get to the point where some kind of non-invasive remedial solution is found, like an earthworm spread or something, will those solutions be offered to all the people who have chosen the AULs over remediation? Do you see that as happening?
I don't see that happening in rest of the river. There's a provision, an adaptive management provision where innovative technology can be used. So if it's in rest of the river, it could happen.
But all these people who are just sort of in limbo without a cleanup and restrictions, but with the potential that it could be cleaned up or
Yeah,
further
this person
contaminate,
This person made this decision, so. And
and
property.
nothing could be done to force them to do that.
We could look during rest of the river if there's a need, like we said, to clean up the vernal pool. Our strong preference is certainly not to issue access orders, but it is possible.
So we should advise people who reach out to us to make certain that they know in the future whatever they need to do legally now, or to enter into agreements with EPA for adaptive management and, alternative destruction technology and emerging technologies that come into the future. We should encourage them to discuss that with you, right?
Sure.
I guess if EPA was sued in the future with a technology that became available.
Dean, maybe we cover the chlorobenzene and I'll see if there's okay.
Chlorobenzene investigations, I know we talked about these probably in October. This was an issue with groundwater discharge and mostly to Uncomet Brook, where there were some exceedances in the wells that we talked about, and G's doing a study of collecting samples in core water and in surface water. Just a brief update is there's 5 rounds of sampling to be required. 3 of them were completed last fall, and then the water elevations became very high and the river froze and the brook froze. So it was terminated, and there's 2 more rounds that have to be done to complete this part of the program, and those will be done as soon as the high flows recede this spring. So that project's still ongoing.
Okay. Questions?
That's all I got.
I do want to see CCC if it's okay if there's any public comment first. I want to do a little bit of scheduling for meetings the rest of the year to Judy's point about this is the first meeting we've had in 2019, 2018, 2019, what year is it? So any public comment from folks tonight? Yes, and it just come forward, state your name. I would just ask you to speak in the mic only for the cable broadcast. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks. Mary Jane Mattina. The 20,000 parts per million that you said was excavated, it was a site where you hit 20,000 parts per million PCBs? Is that correct?
That's correct.
And that was excavated?
That's correct.
Okay, if my math was right, 20,000 parts per million is 2%. Where was that dumped?
I don't think it was dumped. I think it came out of GE's outfall pipe, the discharge pipe from the facility.
You're referring to where was it taken when it was removed?
Oh, where was it placed?
Where was it taken when it was removed? Yeah.
I thought you meant where was it dumped in the river. It was taken to an off-site licensed landfill that takes PCB waste over 50 parts per million. The actual facility, I don't know off the top of my head.
So it was transported from the site off?
Correct.
Presumably out of state?
Definitely out of state.
Okay. The delta that you mentioned, that little area, you say that's fairly contaminated. If you poured down into the sediments.
Correct. There's about a foot of clean fill on top of that. Below that is contaminated. Yes.
About a foot, and then so 12 inches and below that. Do you know the levels of contamination down there?
I don't know those off the top of my head.
Have core samples been taken there, and has it been analyzed?
If it was analyzed prior to the consent decree. Prior to 2000, the year 2000. So I'm not 100% familiar with all the data on that delta.
Is that area fenced in at all?
No.
So it is accessible then to the general public? I mean,
It's accessible. It's usually muddy, but you could walk out there.
And are we talking potentially 20,000 parts per million?
I don't think 20,000, but I don't have any data.
But it was capped though, right?
It was capped with a foot of fill and is heavily vegetated. But yes, there is contamination below that foot of soil.
Okay, and potentially that contamination could reach horizontally, right? I mean, you're talking about a cap, and that's, a 12-inch cap. But in heavy rain events, there could be outflow into Silver Lake.
It's possible. I haven't seen any evidence of it, but it's possible.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay, so CCC in terms of scheduling, I think we need to talk a little bit about expectations about meetings. So obviously our earlier meeting was canceled because of the shutdown. Right? And so we've had this meeting. We typically have a summer meeting and or tour and a fall meeting. So I'm curious what CCC would like in terms of meetings and what you all are thinking about meetings the rest of the year. So what are people thinking? Do we want to shoot for, because sometimes it's July, maybe we should shoot for June because this one was later. What are people preferencing about whether we go out and see anything on site in terms of tour? What would you like for the fall?
Yeah, well, we
need a Connecticut.
I would say since usually the April meeting or the spring meeting is Connecticut, I think usually, since we got pushed back, to me it'd be logical to have a June meeting in Connecticut.
How does it time for that?
But I don't know if that's a good time to meet. But the next meeting should be in Connecticut.
What did we do last year? That timing, I think, was really
I think our tour was in Connecticut last summer.
That's right. Do you guys have a preference for when the Connecticut meeting, just to manage different schedules and what else is going on?
No, I'm not, I'm not even going to ask anymore because we've asked for so many years to let's get back on a regular schedule for Wednesdays that we always used to do, and that there's so much data coming out at times that we're not meeting often enough. I hate to even say that, but remember, we used to meet once a month to go over everything that was being put into the repositories, and there's just a lot to keep up with, and things are probably going to pick up. And so whatever you want to do, we'll be there. I'm not going to ask anymore.
I think the fact that all Connecticut gets is monitored natural recovery, and GE is not communicating with our DEEP, and I know that there's just a little constipation with the EPA with everything that's going on. And it would be really good to have a Connecticut meeting when any of that breaks loose and gets discussed, and we get some communication between GE and what they are willing to monitor in our state.
So are you suggesting?
So I'm suggesting we put that off till the fall, till, September, I don't know, maybe I don't know how long it's going to be. It just goes on for years and years. But I think that's really important information for Connecticut to have, is what kind of monitoring we are going to get.
So if we did a September Connecticut meeting, just to name a month.
Just to say, yeah, potentially with the hopes that there would be something breaking loose, that we would get information about the situation with our monitoring.
For summer, do you have a meeting? Do you want to go out and see some things? What's people's preference for what we might do roughly June timeframe? Jamie?
I'd really like to go back out and look at the Uncommon Brook work, and for that matter, I'd like to look, I guess I can go and look around the edge of Silver Lake anytime.
Tear the dam, they're going to tear the dam out.
The teleelectric, that might be fun. Teleelectric dam while it's being worked on.
There's no PCBs on the West Branch, is there?
So I've been told.
That's what we told. They told us.
It's open. It's not the easiest and most accessible place, but you can get there.
Who's doing the work, Jane, on that?
It's
the city and the trustees have been.
Okay, so that's
Jim's doing it all.
Right. Okay. So we've heard at least two things. So, and are people thinking June? Good.
Later June.
Later June.
That's good for me.
So you're thinking kind of maybe last week in June potentially?
I know I'm not going to.
Okay, so one, I think to Judy's point, we'll try to shoot for Wednesdays. We'll look for a tour maybe that last week in June. We'll look at schedules. Connecticut meeting in September, and then maybe a final meeting because we're behind in November.
We could have it in October, we could kind of double up that first month, but it's a.
We should probably just get into people's schedules too, so I'm wondering whether, if we have a Connecticut meeting in September, do you want to have this meeting again in October, in November? I know the holidays start coming in. Judy's being very amenable.
I would say October, relatively close together.
So June?
September, October?
Yeah, September.
Connecticut, September, and then up here, October?
Yeah, that works.
And we'll shoot for Wednesdays, we'll try to look at.
Kind of get back to October, January, April. We really got thrown off losing that January one.
We'll look at EPA schedules and we'll try to find Wednesdays. Okay. All right. So anything other sort of substantive business before we turn to Mr. Murphy?
That's substantive.
So because of the shutdown, I think we had Jim for longer. I think this is a chance if people want to share any reflections, history, good humor about Jim. This would be a lovely time to do it. And then because of the kindness of folks here at the table, there may be some treats to eat afterwards. So anybody want to share any reflections from Mr. Murphy in his waning days on the project, EPA?
Maybe Jim can tell us about his vacation.
Yeah, we should definitely.
Yes.
The reason, Judy, we tried to have a Wednesday, but there's always one person who messes it all.
Who's that, Conway?
Well, that too, but this time it was Jim, because Jim did gracefully agree to stay on EPA longer, and this was the day he could make it. We did move it today, but before Jim goes, I just have to give my appreciation for Jim. I think he's been on it. I can't remember. I think he was kind of a new person, but it's probably been 15 years. I don't even know, but
Has it been that long?
been very, very helpful and has established some really good relationships for EPA in the community, and just very thankful for Jim's appreciation. And fortunately, we got Kelsey, not that she can replace Jim, but she can succeed Jim, and Kelsey's excellent, so I'm very happy, and I think you'll really like Kelsey. She does an outstanding job as well.
I apologize that Bruce isn't here. He's actually teaching tonight, but we really appreciate the fact that you go into BCC and help out in class and stuff.
If I go back, I can probably talk about a few more things.
Maybe at his post time will be more interesting.
Have you really been at this site for 15 years?
I think I think it's the 13th since Angela left, Angela Bonrigo.
Yes, I remember the first time I met Jim, we were at the next section of the river, and there was maybe an old car dealership. Do you know where I'm talking about? There's an office there, and it was a section of the river that we were looking at outfalls. It was heavily contaminated. Do you know, I don't remember the name of the...
Where our field office is, off Lyman Street.
No, it was
Farther down, I don't know.
And Angela was gone, and here comes Jim all smiley-faced, and of course we're pretty jaded people, and it's like, oh, here we go, here's a new one, and he'll be gone soon. And he was trying to make friends, and we were at a really heavily contaminated section of the river that had yet to be taken care of, and he just was effervescent. And I don't think we were having much of you that day, but that changed quickly after that.
Other reflections? I think we had 2 emails. Do you want to share those a little bit?
Sure, 2 just very short emails. Jeff Cook is very sorry that he wasn't able to attend because of a funeral, and he wanted to wish Jim Murphy well and express appreciation for all the work he's done on the project and for putting up with me meeting Jeff for all these years, and he will definitely be missed by all of us. Valerie Anderson also wanted to wish Jim well and say that he was a great resource to us all.
Oh, that's sweet.
I would like to thank you, Jim, for your, as Judy said, your effervescence, your ability to remain calm and not take things personally, and even though you're on the side of EPA, we felt that you were also on our side as well. And we really appreciate that strong advocate in our corner. So thank you for that.
I get confused whose side everybody's on sometimes.
Anyone else?
Well, I'll just say, go ahead. Just to respond to what Barbara said, I can, exactly what Tim said, everybody asked me, I can never fill Jim's shoes, and I joke that I can't fill his Crocs, certainly, but Jim wears Crocs a lot. He's also taught me pretty much everything I know here, and I've actually been at EPA about 10 years, and followed him around this site for 5 or so. So I'm hoping to do my best, and I try to have the same, don't take it personally, want to be on your side, get to know you guys all better, but, you know, you can also blame him if I do things wrong, because he really has taught me everything.
I'd just like to thank Jim for inviting us to his cake party. This is awful nice of him.
Ken and Susan.
Yeah, I got a good moment. So I woke up one morning, I don't know what time it was. It was later than 8:15, I know that. And there's a car pulling up in front, and I'm looking out to the car, and I think it was Dean and Jim that was there. It had gone to just about 9 o'clock, something like that, and you guys showed up at the front door. My wife's going, what are they doing here? You know, and I'm going, well, they're stopping here for an EPA meeting or something. And so she looked real thrilled about that. And but they came in and we had a little like 10-minute meeting. I can't even really remember what it was all about at that point, but I just wanted to mention that there they were. I offered them coffee, and I don't think we even did that, but so look out, they may show up at your door at 8 o'clock.
On that note, that reminds me, you get these calls from Jim. Jim is just notorious for loving to travel. I get a call like Thursday, 4 o'clock. Hey, you mind if I swing by the Berkshires tomorrow? He goes, it's on my way. Well, where are you going? Well, to Brooklyn, New York, and then up to God knows where in Vermont. And I'm like, how does that fit in with swinging by Joe's Diner, you know, meeting people in Lenoxdale? I go, well, I guess, but like, isn't that a long trip? He goes, oh no, that's like 4-hour, 6-hour trips or nothing. Loves coming out on Fridays for some reason. I don't know why. There were certain days that Jim, yeah, I'll be out there. Well, there's nothing going on. Yeah, I'll be out there. And that's just the way, you know, just meeting people and talking. It's a great way to be. I wish I was more flexible.
Just echoing what everybody else said, I just appreciate Jim's down-to-earthness and sense of humor, especially dealing with such a difficult topic over the years. I think he gives us hope in moving forward on such a difficult topic and just giving us a little lighter note. And I've seen Jim in other contexts. He showed up one day at Hartford with Gina McCarthy when she was the EPA administrator, and I just, you know, walk up to Jim, you know, here he is with the administrator. He's like, hey, how you doing, Jim? And, you know, some people, they get up in certain positions and they sort of like don't know you or disconnect. And Jim's always just so down to earth and friendly and helpful. And I just have always appreciated it. So thank you so much for being you.
So, I can say just a few words. I worked with Jim since, I don't know, when he started at another site.
97.
97?
You just started yourself.
I probably had. I was young. I had none of the hair color you have. And you know, Jim just brought like energy and enthusiasm and just kind of a different attitude. So he wasn't like, you know, he wasn't kind of coming across like always the company line. He really engaged people, took them where they were. And what I love most about Jim's work with all of you and the many of the sites I've seen him on is he's always been respectful of the community, which I think is like quality one of any good community engagement person. But there's something he does better and different, which is he really engages people. He really likes them. There are tough sites where he goes, oh, I would go knock on doors. And you're like, really? You want to do that? That's a little scary. He's like, nope, happy to do it. And he would just go do it, and he'd take what came from people being angry, upset, frustrated, whatever, and really engage them. So I think he's been an asset to communities. He's been an incredible asset to EPA. And I think we all wish you very, very well in return.
Bravo.
So just a couple of things. Kelsey and I did our sort of lame attempt to get a cake and soda and all this, and of course the Connecticut contingent, they outdid us. So all the good stuff back there and the decorations and the props, that's all from Connecticut. And so we appreciate it. We really do appreciate it. And I think it's a tribute credit to Jen and that they came up with some clever items.
The artists are Lynn Fowler and my husband, Kim or Mountain Herkimer.
Get people free to have some bites.
Definitely, have some bites, talk to Jen.
Enjoy.
Can I just say one thing?
No, we didn't let you.
You said enough.
With your plaid shirt, which was also very
So, I don't want to take any more of people's time, but it's really been a great pleasure, plus just an honor to work, well, at EPA and on a bunch of the more complicated and difficult sites that never seem to end. There's a few others out there too. But I'm just amazed at the dedication of all the citizens who don't get paid. I'm still getting paid tonight to go to this meeting and eat cake, you know. Can't beat it with your money. But you know, I've always tried to do the best job I can, and I always do the. I know I'm doing the best job when I'm out with community people and really connecting with them, even if we can't agree on stuff. And I look forward to, talking with people again. I certainly won't be coming to every meeting, but I'm only an hour away, and there's not much in Wilbraham. My wife and I come to the Berkshires a fair amount, so I'll just have to convince her to come on a Wednesday night, not a Thursday. But anyway, I just want to thank everybody in this room for all of the support that you've given me in making my job easier over the years. And the people at EPA are really special. Tim, as you know, and Brian, other ones that you've met in the past, and also a lot of our, the partners that we work with. In Massachusetts and even in the other New England states, there's just a lot of amazing people who work for the states and are very dedicated to. And it's just things work best when we're on the same page and we can finally get with the community and try to resolve. There's never any real happy ending with any of these sites, but except for this one. But that's it. I just want to thank everybody, and I really appreciate the little party tonight. Too bad there's not any beer, but that's okay. How come that's it? That was it. Thanks a whole lot.